Hello, and welcome to Stories from India. This is a podcast where we talk about myths, legends, and folk tales from India. I am your host, Narad Muni, and I'm a mythological character myself. I have the gift of eternal life and knowledge of the past, the present, and the future. By profession, I'm a traveling musician and a storyteller. So the way I'm doing my job is by podcast. In this episode, we are doing a story from the Brihatkatha featuring a tomato bath, an ego clash between kings, and a Trojan white elephant. The story starts with a queen, Mrigavati, the queen of Kaushambi. Everything was perfectly normal in this kingdom. The king was happy. Taxes were flowing in. But people weren't grumbling too much. In fact, the only one who was grumbling, according to the king, was Mrigavati. She had this intense desire to take a bath. The king, who didn't really listen, dismissed his wife's requests without even fully listening to her. He thought she was asking him to take a bath and to drink tomato juice or something. Naturally, he didn't want his lifestyle to be dictated by his wife. The king had had enough of that growing up from his own parents. He was an adult now and king of the land. It meant he should be able to choose whether or not to bathe. It's a pity that the king didn't listen to his wife. She wasn't asking him to take a bath and to drink tomato juice. She herself wanted to bathe in tomato juice. It was an odd request, but her therapist, who was seeing Mrigavati through a difficult pregnancy, had specifically encouraged her to act out on these little harmless whims and fancies. It was okay, nothing to worry about, the therapist had said. It was only the ordinary citizens of the land paying for excesses like these, just like they were going to pay the therapist's exorbitant bill. So anyway, tired of being dismissed over and over by the king, Mrigavati threatened to put him on a diet and exercise regimen. That's when he finally listened and understood. Relieved at not having to subject himself to a bath, the king easily agreed to her request. To keep things simple, he ordered that the swimming pool in their garden be drained of water and replaced with tomato juice. Sure, it meant he would have to steal them from stockpiles that were saved for a heavily requested tomato carnival at the children's hospital. But the king didn't care. The ketchup and fries industry would take a hit too. But the king figured that was a small price to pay compared to having to diet and exercise. So when the pool was finally ready, Mrigavati dived in. She had just come up for air when something shocking happened. A bird, a huge bird, swooped down. It grabbed Mrigavati in its talons and flew off with her. I guess to the bird, which was the size of a house, Mrigavati, covered in all red, looked like meat. The bird had never known meat to wiggle the way Mrigavati was wiggling. Upon suddenly realizing that she wasn't meat after all, the bird dropped the queen. Just like that. Unfortunately for the queen, in just those few seconds, the bird had covered a tremendous distance. She was very far from home. Luckily, though, when she fell from the sky, she fell into a pond that was deep enough that she wasn't really harmed. And the baby inside her seemed okay as well. It was kicking like normal. Mrigavati swam to shore and planned her next steps. She had to find the nearest signpost so she could at least figure out where she was. And then she had to find a way to send a message to Kaushambi. Finally, she had to resume her tomato juice bath. But first, she needed to find some clothes quickly because she would catch a cold wandering about in her swimsuit. And society's views of women, being what they were in ancient India, it was unlikely anyone was going to help her, dressed the way she was. Mrigavati walked a bit, and then later, she saw clothes hanging out to dry. That must mean people were nearby. But first, she grabbed the driest of those clothes and wrapped herself. Next, she hunted about until she saw a small cluster of houses. She knocked on the first one. The door was answered by a kindly old rishi and his wife. They took her in and treated her like the royal guest that she was. The rishi and his wife didn't know that their guest was really royal, but they treated every guest like God. Selfless hospitality is just natural in Indian culture. The rishi's wife also remarked that it was a marvelous coincidence that she had the exact same sari as Mrigavati, but Mrigavati didn't flinch. The rishi's wife said that they might have bought their saris from the same store, which was good because that meant they could explore this common link and find the location of this Kaushambi kingdom that Mrigavati had talked about. The rishi and his wife had never heard of Kaushambi. It was lucky they were at least speaking the same language. The rishi and his wife had never heard of tomatoes before. If they also felt it strange that Mrigavati needed to continue bathing in this tomato juice, they were careful not to show it. Over the next few days, all of their efforts to locate Kaushambi were in vain. They searched, they quizzed every passerby and traveler, but no one had heard of Kaushambi. More days passed until finally Mrigavati gave birth to a baby boy. She named him Udayan. The boy grew up and was everything you might expect from the hero of a folktale. Intelligent, charming, wise. While growing up, he also had free education. The rishi and his wife had provided years of free boarding and lodging to Mrigavati and her son. But they also provided the boy with an education. You might appreciate that, especially given the rising costs of education, of housing, and food prices these days. But that wasn't all. There was a bonus. The rishi had a few tricks up his sleeve. He taught the boy one of those tricks. And that was how to control elephants. The answer was music. That shouldn't surprise you if you have read Harry Potter or if you have read the Tintin comics. Hagrid plays a flute to manage his massive three-headed dog, Fluffy, and Tintin plays a trumpet to control elephants. Just like that, Udayan, learned that by playing very specific notes on his veena, which is an Indian musical instrument, he could get an elephant to do anything. As a veena player myself, I can attest to the difficulty that Udayan had overcome here. One of the first things he did as he mastered the skill was to summon his elephants and ask them for tomatoes. Loads of tomatoes. That would finally make his mother stop her complaining. The Rishi, the expert in elephant communication, smacked his forehead and wondered why he didn't think of asking the elephants. He could have avoided 15 years of nagging from his guest about tomato juice baths. Truly, he had shown great restraint to continue to be hospitable. Maybe that's why he hadn't been thinking rationally. Or maybe this time the student was just a step ahead of the teacher. Udayan certainly showed that when he played more notes on the veena, asking the elephants if they knew the path back to Kaushambi. The elephants, who were avid travelers, knew exactly where Kaushambi was. It was a nice holiday city, they said. A little commercial, a decent place to get a good bite to eat. They rated it 4 stars. They would have rated it 5 stars if the grass had been just a little bit greener. Udayan was on the veena again, giving out more commands. Soon, Udayan and Mrigavati were on one of the elephants' backs, making the long trip back to Kaushambi. Mrigavati agreed to leave only after she realized that Kaushambi probably still had her tomato juice swimming pool. It took a few days, and when they got there, they introduced themselves to the crowd. Now, you might expect that people would be a little suspicious. A queen disappeared 15 years ago, and now this lady appeared with a boy who claimed to be the heir to the throne. But the people of Kaushambi easily believed Mrigavati and Udayan's story. The king had gotten a little too old to remember Mrigavati, but the mention of the tomato juice swimming pool rang a faint bell, and the king used that as an excuse to give up his throne to Udayan. He had had enough of this training, and he was desperately looking forward to returning to a life of quiet retirement, full of golf and fishing. The gamble paid off for Kaushambi because under Udayan's leadership, the kingdom prospered. Udayan was able to use his elephants to control everything. That made it impossible to defeat his armies in battle, because elephants were the equivalent of tanks in ancient Indian warfare. A neighboring king, Pradyot of Ujjain, was getting increasingly worried about Udayan's suddenly growing influence. Pradyot and his ministers hatched a plan. So, Udayan could control elephants, could he? His strength was exactly what they were going to exploit as a weakness. A couple of days later, some people rushed into Udayan's court to report something remarkable. It was a white elephant. Literally, a white-colored elephant. And it was spotted in the forest that lay between Kaushambi and Ujjain. Udayan was excited by this news. He had all kinds of elephants, and they did a lot of the work for him. But he's never had a white elephant before. He quickly summoned his veena, grabbed an elephant, and went off into the forest. He had some bodyguards, naturally, but not his entire army. And that was exactly what King Pradyot had hoped for. Udayan found the elephant, which wasn't doing much. It seemed very much like a statue, except once or twice it moved its trunk and tail. Udayan got down from his own elephant, took his veena, and sat close to where the white elephant was. He started playing his veena, but the white elephant did not move. Something was off. Maybe the white elephant didn't hear properly? Someone asked. Udayan tried again. He gave the elephant the command to nod its head. A simple command, really. It just went sa, re, ga, ma on his veena. But it didn't work. Udayan wondered if maybe the command was sa, ga, re, ma. Sa, re, ga, ma seemed to be the command for the elephant to open its belly and let soldiers come tumbling out. And the elephant didn't nod its head yet either. Wait a minute, thought Udayan. An elephant with a belly full of soldiers? Soldiers dressed in the Ujjain army uniform? Uh-oh. He realized what was going on, but it was too late now. Udayan was taken prisoner. His 3 bodyguards were no match for the 20 Ujjain soldiers hidden in the fake elephant. Udayan was promptly put into a prison in Ujjain. He was regularly visited by Pradyot, who only came there to gloat and to ask him for the secret of controlling elephants. Udayan's reaction initially surprised Pradyot. Yes, Udayan would love to share the secret to Pradyot. All that Pradyot had to agree to do was to admit that Udayan was better than him. Not much of an ask really, but Pradyot had one big ego. He refused to admit anything of the sort. Upon realizing that Udayan was willing to teach his skills to someone who could accept Udayan's superiority, Pradyot sent his own daughter. Her name was Vasavdatta. Vasavdatta politely admitted to Udayan that as he was about to become her teacher, she gladly accepted that he was better than her. Udayan immediately agreed to teach her. See, that was easy, Vasavdatta whispered to her dad. After that, Vasavdatta had private lessons from Udayan every day, in a part of the prison where no one else could hear them. This went on for a while, and while Pradyot was convinced that his daughter had almost learned the full secret, the reality was a little different. Udayan wasn't teaching anything anymore, and Vasavdatta wasn't really learning elephant controlling spells on the veena. She was learning about Udayan, as Udayan was learning about her. The two had fallen hopelessly in love. The couple decided that they were made for each other and that they must escape back to Kaushambi. That was the only way out. Luckily for them, the path forward was easy. Vasavdatta herself suggested it, but Pradyot himself had given her the most important tool here. Vasavdatta spent the next few days with Udayan, planning and writing out exactly the sequence of notes that would get them to freedom. So finally, the appointed day arrived when she was going to demonstrate her new skills to her very proud father. In fact, Pradyot was a good father. He clapped and encouraged his daughter even when she seemed to misdirect the last elephant so badly. She had it smash the prison walls instead of smashing Udayan, who was behind them. But Pradyot cheered on. It was only after the elephant picked up first Udayan and second Vasavdat herself and zoomed off in the Kaushambi direction that Pradyot realized that he had been had. His own daughter had betrayed him. He sighed and wondered where he had gone wrong in parenting her. That's where the story ends. Kinda. There is a bit more to Udayan and Vasavdatta, but that's a story for another time. A few notes. I have to admit, I've taken a little liberty with the whole tomato obsession that Mrigavati had. In the original story, she only cared about being painted red, head to toe. You might have already figured this out if you know that tomatoes only came to India via Portuguese explorers in the 16th century. In case you're not familiar with the Trojan Horse, it features a story of a war between the Greeks and the Trojans. The story goes that Helen, the wife of a king, ran away with Paris of Troy. The Greeks didn't like that, naturally, so they fought a war. Only, the city of Troy did a pretty good job holding the fort, and the Greeks laid siege, but despite attempting for years, they could not find a way in. Finally, one day, all of the Greek ships left. That's it. They had packed up and sailed away in apparent defeat. The Trojans even received a gift, a giant wooden horse on rollers, so it was easy to move. The Trojans brought the horse into the fort. They celebrated that night. And that's when Greek soldiers who had been hiding inside the giant wooden horse emerged and opened the gates from the inside. The Greeks had only pretended to sail away. They were all hiding just outside the gates. The Greeks slaughtered the Trojans. Initially reported as mythology, it turned out to be fact when the city of Troy was in fact discovered in Turkey. The Trojan War happened many centuries before the story, but it's injudicious to say that the plot element of the soldiers hiding inside the fake elephant is based on the story of the Trojan War. The elephant in today's story was so well made that it fooled people into thinking it was a real elephant. I guess the science of taxidermy and animatronics had advanced a little in the intervening centuries. As for the tomato bath, that has no relation to the famous festival in Spain that was even featured in Bollywood, in Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. The Brihatkatha are a series of stories that have not survived but have morphed into derivative works like the Kathasarit Sagar, which we have also covered before on the show. But they live on in the minds of people who have the ability to travel back and forth in time, like I do. We'll cover more Brihatkatha stories in the future, but for next time, we'll do a Gujarati folk tale. This one is about a prince who is cheated out of his throne and changed into a fish. He compensates first by becoming very large very quickly, and second, by demanding a human wife. This story also features a seven-headed snake and magic rocks. If you have comments or suggestions, or if there are particular stories that you would like to hear, please do let me know by leaving a comment or a review on the site sfipodcast.com or tweet at sfipodcast. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get notified automatically of new episodes. A big thank you to each and every one of you for your continued support and your feedback. The music is from purpleplanet.com. That's purple-planet.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.